You're listening to Wildlife Control Consultant, where we provide research-based information on all things related to vertebrate pest management. Hi everyone, Stephen Vantassel here, host of the Wildlife Control Consultant podcast, bringing you another episode of the Wildlife Control Consultant podcast, where we cover all things related to the technical areas of wildlife damage management. If you're unclear what that means, we cover everything that could be a pest that has a spine, so have to have a backbone in order for us to cover. That's where the word vertebrate comes from. So we don't deal with bugs unless we're getting into bugs that are associated with vertebrates, and so that's where the focus of this particular podcast was. Pest control, but a subset of the larger field of pest control. So mice, rats, beavers, moles, pocket gophers, birds, and the like. That's what we cover here on the Wildlife Control Consultant podcast. All right, well, glad to have you on board. I hope you had a great week. I am still digging out, but I'm getting closer and closer to Shangri-La here. So things have been, some other work came on me that I wasn't quite expecting, and so that's kind of put a little bit of a stress on me, but it's all right. Still doing okay. So I hope you are too. Here we are in the dog days of summer. Some of you may have a little bit of a lull here in the mid-July region, which is probably the time when this podcast will be published. But nevertheless, I hope you're being safe and well, and make sure you hydrate while you're out there. So really glad to have you on board. If you have questions, comments, thoughts, definitely you can reach me at Wildlife Control Consultant at gmail.com, wildlifecontrolconsultant@gmail.com. Would love to hear from you. If you're interested in being a guest on the show, we would love to talk to you about that. First, please go back and search for the podcast that deals with how to be a guest on the show. And so I have a whole half-hour presentation covering what it takes to be a guest on the show. Please view that first before reaching out to me. I would love to talk to you. Also, if you have criticisms of the show, you can reach me, either put it into the comments below, or you can reach me again at wildlifecontrolconsultant@gmail.com. All right, well, just a quick highlight of one of the services I provide, and that is I do some PowerPoint work. If you have a presentation that you're looking to make, of course, we're coming up to training season, which typically kicks in around September. So those of you that may need to do some presentations before various associations or states and want to get that polished up, or you just don't have the time to do it all, would definitely love to talk to you, because I do some work in the PowerPoint area, so we can get it up to snuff. And there's a pricing schedule there, and I can do a lot of work. You give me the raw material, we can get a lot done within within the hour given there for your work. But definitely reach out to me. All right, well, enough of that about myself. So let's get started and talk a little bit about my topic today. Of course, last week we talked about repellents and beyond the hype, right? So talked about the different types of repellents and why people think they worked, and why there was some misunderstandings at times about repellents. This week we're kind of doing a little bit deeper dive into repellents and about why they don't work, and why they fail and why they don't, right? So what you as a consumer, what you as a professional should know about repellents before you open your wallet. So just a reminder, we're not talking about frightening devices. So devices are not chemicals. So the owl effigy that you see on people's buildings, that is not a repellent. Sometimes people use the word repellent regarding that particular types, but in the technical terms that we're using here, repellents only refer to those products that have a chemical basis to them rather than a physical or non-chemical basis to it, right? There's some legal reasons for that, right? Typically, frightening devices are not regulated as a rule, where repellents are regulated in our country, in the United States. It's regulated by the EPA, and then, of course, each of your own states can be more restrictive than the EPA should it choose to do so. So we are only focusing here on the chemical items that are designed to keep animals away from unwanted areas. And again, I want to remind everyone that when we're dealing with chemicals, we do need to follow the law, and the law is listed there on the label. Now, it's not the entire law, but it is something where you as an applicator need to understand how to use that product. And the way you're going to learn it is you have to read the fine print on it. I know it's small. I know it can be tedious. They're not the best written. I get it, right? Things are getting better, but nevertheless, you are still responsible for understanding that label and applying it according to the label guidelines. If there are questions and comments, you can always reach out to the manufacturer, or you can reach out to pesticide enforcement or training within your own state. They are happy to help you interpret that label, because sometimes there's some gray areas, and the state can help you navigate some of those gray areas, right? And so that can be helpful. It's always good to be ahead of the curve on that, right? You don't want enforcement chasing you. You want to come up front to them, and that really puts them in a better state of mind, because they do want to help you, so don't see them as the enemy. See them as people that are trying to give you some guidance. And if you ask for guidance, and they can help you navigate how that label's to be interpreted, so that you are not going to get in trouble with the law there. But also, the label's, of course, going to tell you how to use the product appropriately, right? So it can have the best chance of efficacy. And then lastly, how to protect yourself, because these are chemicals. Yes, chances are these chemicals are not known for their high levels of toxicity and danger, but that nevertheless, there are going to be protective requirements. Sometimes it could be just as simple so that you don't, put your finger in a capsaicin-based repellent and then rub your eye, right? And then you're going to feel the fire in your eye that you would normally have in your mouth, right? So when you have a chili pepper, for example, we don't want it in our eyes. And so sometimes it's just some common sense instructions to protect you and others from potential harm or even irritation from these particular products. All right, so make sure you're following that label. I recommend people read the label before you purchase the product. All right, just a reminder again what our categories of repellents are. We dealt with this in more depth in our last week presentation, so if you want to learn more about these categories of repellents, go back a week earlier and get that material. But just as a reminder, we have fear and odor, and I've boxed those two together because they are closely related to one another. And then we have conditioned-aversion, and then we have taste repellents, and then we have tactile repellents, right? So those are your main categories of chemical repellents. Of course, I'm being a little redundant there with chemical repellents. All right, so let's talk about why repellents fail, right? So what are some reasons why repellents fail? Now, the first one I'm going to put out, not in any particular order, right? I'm not saying that these are the most common reasons that they fail. I'm just simply saying these are common reasons why they fail, but they're not in order of hierarchy here, right? So we're just listing them. Think of it as bullet points, right? So the first one, of course, is inadequate coverage. A lot of repellents, of course, are specific location repellents rather than an odor that gives you an area repellent. So if you don't protect that particular spot, then an animal can bite that part of the plant or move in a part of an area that is not treated with the repellent with no ill effect. So this is why it's so important to be sure that when the instructions are telling you, if you're spraying something, a lot of repellents are liquid-based, when you're spraying them over, let's say, a plant that you're trying to protect from deer damage, it's important to have proper coverage of those leaves and stems so that the deer can't find a spot that's untreated, right? Now, that's easier said than done, But if for a general rule, if you want to make sure you have good coverage, so you're not having gaping holes in your plants, because the animals will find those gaping gaps, right? The areas that you missed, right? So make sure you develop a system to use the product so that you're not leaving gaps that an animal can exploit. Another key reason why repellents fail, of course, is you fail to reapply the product because they wear out. So the repellents don't just simply, they're not like plutonium where they're in the environment for decades, right? They will wear out, particularly when there's rainfall or precipitation. So you're going to need to make sure that you are monitoring the calendar, and reapplying when there has been a rainfall, because a lot of your labels will require that, or if you have new growth, right? So if you're applying a contact repellent onto a plant and the plant grows, a lot of times the new growth areas will not have the repellent on them. And of course, what are the animals going to eat? They're going to eat your new growth. So this is where the reapplication period is so critical. And so you need to make sure you're following label guidelines. So sometimes people, they'll spray it and they think it just lasts forever. No, you have to reapply many of these repellents in order to get sufficient protection for an extended period of time. So the next thing we want to make sure we're doing, and that is try not to use a repellent that everyone else is using. Now this is going to be harder for you to implement, right? So here's the issue. In other words, if all the plants in the neighborhood are treated with the same repellent, then the animals may just have to hold their nose and power through it, right? Because what's the alternative for the animal? So what I tell them to tell people is like, if you have a repellent, don't tell anyone if it works, right? So because you want them not to use it, right? Because you want the animals to go from your plants that are protected to their plants that aren't. But if everyone is using the same repellent, then the animals have no choice but to power through. And what I explain to people is that, yeah, typically humans don't eat bark on trees. But if you're starving, you're going to eat bark on a tree. Animals are no different, right? So if everyone's using a repellent and the animal has a choice of, do I have to tolerate this bad odor or this bad taste, or starve to death, the animal is simply going to tolerate the bad taste or the bad odor and eat, because the alternative is death, right? So one of the reasons why repellents fail is the animal has no other choice but to use it. Right? Another reason why repellents fail, and that is the active ingredient is too low. Now, I haven't given you which product this one is in particular, but I just wanted to point out the active ingredient of the product. This is the part of the product that has been deemed to be the chemical that has the repellency effect. Look at how small of a percentage of the total product you're buying. So you're buying, let's say you're buying a gallon of this particular repellent. How much active ingredient is in this repellent? Well, look at this particular number. Let me read it for you. 0.0000125%. I gotta count the zeros here. So we're looking at 4 zeros after the decimal point. So that's tens, hundreds, thousands, 10,000s. We now get into the 100,000s, and then the millions, and then the 10 millions, and then the 100 millions. So 1125 millionths of percent of that particular product, right? So that is what you're dealing with. So you're dealing with with a fraction of a fraction of a fraction of 1% of capsaicin. Now, is capsaicin really that strong? Because you can get other products that'll be significantly higher than that particular number. So chances are, if you're not having success with this is a taste repellent. If you're not having success with this taste repellent, chances are it might be because the active ingredient is too low, right? So something to think about. This is why reading the label is so very important. Now, if you're having success with it, great. But if you're not, this may be one reason why you're not. Okay. Or another reason why repellents fail, and that is if you buy a product with the active ingredient and you're not having success, and then you buy another product that looks like it's different, but you didn't read the label carefully enough because you bought a product with the same active ingredient. It just has a different label on it. It just has a different brand name. It's sort of like if you needed a truck and you bought a car, but you need a truck, and then you ended up buying another car because it was named a truck even though it wasn't a truck. Don't look at the flashy material on the product packaging. Read the label to tell you what the active ingredient is and the percentage of that active ingredient. So here we have one, it's animal repellent granular, and it uses 0.032% capsaicin. And if you went over and bought shotgun hot pepper wax animal repellent, you'll notice that it also has capsaicin as the active ingredient. So if you bought the animal repellent granular and you didn't have success, what makes you think you're going to have success with the next one? It's the same active ingredient. Okay, something for you to think about. This is why it's important to read that label. Another reason why repellents fail is inadequate alternative foods. And what I mean by this is that repellents rely on the opportunity to make the animal move to vegetation that they wouldn't have eaten initially. So animals like us, we like to eat the foods we like the most first. And when they run out, you move to the foods that you don't like as much. So you apply the repellent on the animal's favorite foods, and hopefully the neighbor has those favorite foods and the deer move over there. However, if you have such high pressure of deer, in other words, you have so many deer around, the repellent's not going to work because all the food, the favorite food is going to be gone. So if you're in an area where you have a browse line 6 feet high, you have probably so many deer that no repellent is going to work in that particular situation because, as I said earlier, the alternative for the deer is simply to starve. And no deer is going to do that. They're just going to power through and eat because they're going to eat something. Okay? That's something that you have to think about. So this is why some people will use a repellent and they'll have awesome success with it. Why? Because there are so few deer in the area, the deer just simply move on to other foods. And a little bit of spray, boom, you're done. Other folks will use the same product in the same way and have very little success with it because there's so many deer in the area, the deer have no other choice but they're going to starve to death. I hope that helps you because this is what makes it so complicated to talk about whether a repellent works or not, because it's contextual based on the level of pressure. By pressure, we mean the number of animals you're trying to keep away from a particular food source. And how do you know that unless you're really familiar with the population dynamics in your particular area? Now let's turn to the positive side. Why do repellents work? Well, part of it is because we have quality research that proves that they do work. And I'm just highlighting here putrescent whole egg solids. Deer repellents have been the most researched products that are repellents in the country, hands down. right? When we're dealing with vertebrate repellents, I'm not talking about bugs right here, right? So when we're dealing with vertebrate repellents, deer repellents have had the most research done. Research that's been done multiple times over in many different decades, okay? And what they found over and over and over again is putrescent whole egg solids have a very good track record for working. Now, what do we mean by working? Working up to 80% of the time. That means that you're still maybe getting 20% worth of damage depending on your situation, but they don't work 100%, right? Because there's different deer pressures in different areas, right? But they work really well, and they're one of the most demonstrated products that work, of course. So that's one reason why some of these repellents work, because we just know that they work under a variety of different circumstances, okay? Another reason, which is sort of the flip side of what I said before, and that is if there is sufficient alternative food sources available to the animals, then when you put the repellent on bush A, the deer are going to move over to the untreated bush B and eat there, which is fine with you because it may not be on your property and you don't care, right? So that's going to work. Why? Because the deer have plenty of alternative food to eat. It's sort of like if I have a baseball bat and I'm trying to protect my Cheerios, you want Cheerios, but I have a baseball bat. But there's also another bowl across the room with a box of Cheerios and milk that I'm not protecting. Are you going to fight me for my one bowl of Cheerios, or are you going to go over to the bowl of Cheerios that I'm not protecting? Well, if you're normal, you're going to go over to the bowl of Cheerios and eat over there and not be bothered by me. Well, the deer are going to do the same thing. If they can eat a bush that's untreated, they're going to do that if it's available, right? So this is one reason why the repellent will work. So I hope that gives you some insight into why repellents fail and why they are successful and why you're getting so many mixed messages about the efficacy of repellents. It's complicated, and it's complicated because the efficacy of the repellent is going to be contextually based. It's going to be based on the percentage of the active ingredient, how well you've applied it. Is there alternative food sources? How many animals are you trying to repel, and is there sufficient alternative untreated food available for them to use? That is something that's just simply no manufacturer is going to be able to know for you in advance. You as a professional, you as a homeowner, you're going to have to make the decision and evaluation as to whether it's worth your while to think about repellents. Personally, I think for many people, it may be worth for you to give it a try if you're evaluating how many, is the deer pressure high? Is the deer pressure low? Are you going to be committed to following the label as you're applying it? Because sometimes people have a product that works well enough, but then they forget to reapply it after it rains, right? For many people, it's really going to be worth their while to just think about exclusion and alternative methods of control. But for those of you that want to try repellents, just understand why they fail, why they work, and which of those principles is going to apply in your particular context. So you're going to have to pay attention. You're not just going to spray and be done with it, or spray and pray. If you're really looking to see how well they work, you've got to monitor and evaluate your situation. And I've given you some strategies on how to do that. Thanks for listening. If you've been wanting to reach out to me, you can reach me at wildlifecontrolconsultant@gmail.com, wildlifecontrolconsultant@gmail.com. We'd love to hear from you. You can also comment and label. Then, of course, we'd love to have you subscribe to the channel and ring the bell so you can be updated about other podcasts that I publish. I tend to publish once a week. And of course, if you're interested in being on the show, do take some time to review the podcast about how to be on the show. And if you're still interested, reach out to me at wildlifecontrolconsultant@gmail.com. Would love to talk to you. All right. Well, that's it for repellents. I hope that helps you use them wisely and avoid the hype. and use them wisely without spending a lot of money and wasting your time because knowledge is power in this particular situation. Thanks for listening. Until next time, take care, everyone. This is the disclaimer for Wildlife Control Consultant Podcast. Vertebrate pest control is an inherently dangerous activity involving risk of bodily injury to you, others, and/or property. Vertebrate pest control also involves legal issues, so be sure to always follow national, state, provincial, and local laws when using pesticides and/or other control methods when controlling pests. Wildlife Control Consultant LLC, Stephen M. Vantassel, or their affiliates are not responsible for your use of the information provided here. Always consult a qualified and appropriate professional before employing the information provided here.